Hey, Mike, what do you say to people who ask you, where are the bones of Sasquatch?
Yeah, that's a typical question that a skeptic will come up with. Well, if there's things are seen all over the place, why don't we have bones laying around? Well, first of all, anybody who has any familiarity with woodsmanship, hunting, this sort of thing, realizes that bones don't. Animals when they die, they just don't lay around and rot and turn into bones. You don't see dead bodies everywhere. An animal dying of natural causes finds a place to hide, so it can die in peace. Once it's dead, then the scavengers come, all the various kinds, everything from rats to ants, and they eat the body. And some of these predators will actually pull parts off and run off with it, pull off a leg, pull off an arm. So anyway, an animal dies of natural causes. It's going to only be laying around in the woods for maybe a week, and then it's gone. Pretty much taken away and eaten up. So if an animal like a cougar or a bear is ever found out in the woods on a main trail, for example, where you trip over it, it's because the animal was probably shot and ran away and then died later. It was an unnatural death, in other words. Natural deaths do not end up with apex predators laying around. The other thing about the bones is people will say, well, there's no bones. And my answer to that is, well, yes. All you got to do is go do some research in paleoanthropology and look at all these skeletons that have been dug up all over Africa and Asia of bipedal primates, very similar to ourselves. Of course, the scientists give them a scientific name. They'll call them Homo erectus or Homo neanderthalensis or something like this, Homo ergaster, Homo heidelbergensis. There's a dozen of them or so. And these are animals like us, walking upright, and if one of those animals was alive today, one of those hominins, and you saw it in a forest, you probably wouldn't run to your friends and say, I just saw Homo erectus. You'd probably say, I saw a Bigfoot. And also, in line with that same thing, there are very few fossils of gorillas and chimps in museum collections. For some reason, gorillas and chimps just don't become fossils very often. They have a handful of teeth that they think are a chimpanzee from about 500,000 years ago. But you go back thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years, and there's no indications of chimps or gorillas in the fossil record. And we have them in the zoo. We all agree they exist. So absence of evidence is not an evidence of absence. Speaking of absence, the other question would be, well, wait a minute. If we have giant hominins that have been hanging out on this planet, and they are apex types, and they are supposedly sentient to a degree, we ought to be able to find some giant skeletons here and there. You would think that by now we would have some in museum collections. Oh, well, you know what? There's a whole bit of an intrigue where that is concerned that's only recently started to come out in the open. And that is the concept that giant skeletons were actually hidden away and virtually kept from the general public. Now, there are people who have gone through newspaper archives and have dug up just hundreds of clippings in newspapers from all across the United States of giant skeletons being dug up. But if you go to the museums, you certainly don't see much of this. There are a couple of museums that supposedly have some giant skeletons that they keep sequestered away, but you don't get to see them in the general public. But that's only like a handful of such things. Well, I read an article many years ago on the internet by a Native American lawyer who had done some research into this, and his claim was that in 1948 the Smithsonian was built and the Indian Wars ended around that same time, somewhere around 1948, both of them. So when we took the land here away from the Native Americans, we did it under the idea that they were savages and less than human. They weren't humans like us. They were something else. They were savages. It's okay to kill them and take their land away. And then, when we started moving westward, expanding, and we started digging up these native burial grounds, we started to find giant skeletons amongst signs of higher culture. So it became clear to people in the know who are privy to this stuff that was being dug up, that there was examples here that the Indians were certainly human, and not only were they human, but some of them were giants, apparently. So what's that all about? Well, we think that that was kept secret, that it was an actual deliberate cover-up at first because the people in power were racists and they didn't want to bring anything out to the general public that would indicate that the Native Americans are more than just savages. And it's been hidden. And there's a book on that that's been recently published. And there was a TV show also recently aired where they went and found a skeleton in Arkansas. They found a newspaper article announcing the skeleton. And it said the skeleton had been dug up by an 8-year-old boy. The local doctor got the bones, cleaned them, articulated them, and then the Smithsonian asked for the bones, which he sent right away to the Smithsonian, as a good American would. And when the people on the TV show went to the Smithsonian and asked to see the bones, of course, everybody denied any knowledge that they even existed.